whatever's going on with OpenAI and Anthropic and those companies, what enterprises are doing to get results from this and what vendors are doing is very different. It's a much more constrained architecture that includes the incorporation of customer-specific data through things like RAG and agent tool calling and things like that. The downside to this architecture is it's rather complex to maintain and manage. And it involves, when do we use this model? When do we downsize this model? When do we use a reasoning engine? When do we don't? How do we iterate on this internally? And the problem with that is that customers can run into a lot of trouble if they try to do this on their own. There's a bunch of stats predicting failures in these projects, and we've seen accumulated failures in these projects. So that's one of the problems with the architecture we've arrived at. If you go on YouTube right now and look up like a RAG implementation, the chart of all the components is going to give you a brain freeze. So that's what the vendors are successfully doing, and that's what very sophisticated customers are successfully doing. But I believe the average customer is somewhat locked out of this unless they work with a vendor directly.
Zoho just came out today, introduced their LLM. They run their own data centers. They build their own servers. They host everything internally. Is that the right approach from an enterprise perspective?
1000%.
That's Zoho hosting their LLM, not an enterprise hosting their LLM.
Everybody who's interested in the quality of the data and the content provided and produced by the LLM should host their own. It is not really that hard, and it's actually much more economically efficient than buying tokens from the open market. Switzerland created an LLM model for the entire country that answers all the questions in the country. I have about a dozen cases from companies and organizations and institutions that have recently created their own language models for the same reason. Even relying on an open model for anything that you do is absolutely stupid and demeaning to the quality that you want to achieve. You want to achieve good quality and good results, create your own LLM. The initial cost may be a little more than you think it is, but the maintenance is actually just the same as it cost you before to maintain a knowledge base, if not better.
There are some nuances here because you can build your own LLM with open source technology. Zoho actually built their own LLM from scratch. I don't recommend that for most folks. That requires significant development resources. The thing that's really important about what Zoho has done here is that they know exactly what they train their model on, which you can't say using external models, even if they're open source, because very few even of the open source models disclose what they've been trained on. That's really, really powerful to be able to say that to your customers. Now, having said that, Zoho is going to continue to offer access to external models. That is sensible as well, because even though I have been pretty critical of those models, they do spend an absolute ridiculous amount of money on development of those models, and they don't want to force customers onto their proprietary technology before it's ready. So it's a very sensible move, Brent. And in general, enterprise vendors have an obligation to be much more transparent on their enterprise AI architecture, where the data is going from. And there's a lot of minute details like what happens to your log files that are actually tremendously important, because you can walk around and say, they don't train on our data. By default, they're still taking all your log files. That's what they do. And so that they're not training on it, but they still have it.
Taking one step further. So have Zoho create a core enterprise LLM, offer it to the customers for a modicum for maintenance purposes. And then once you offer it to you, it's instantiated to be your own LLM. You can use it for whatever you need at enterprise level with your data, not nobody else's data.
We're doing, that's what the model is moving. Everyone is taking that subset of it. We're not just using.
No, but there's a difference between being a public model and one that is offered to you for a price that actually, when you buy it, it's your own personal model that is just brought into your organization, and it only grows or it extends the way that you want to do it.
Well, and just real quick too, one of the things I really like about Zoho's approach, and they're not the only vendor doing some of these things, but Zoho's doing a lot of work on figuring out exactly what size model is appropriate for what size task. And the beauty of that is you become much more operationally efficient, and you're not consuming excess energy using LLMs for things you don't need to use them for. And I think that's really smart. And it also really shows you exactly what capabilities smaller models can have. And I think smaller models can be very effective in a lot of cases. The downside to the smaller model is it sometimes it lacks some of the language understanding. For users, yes. For customer-facing stuff, not as much, because customers are going to sometimes interact with smaller models and say, what the hell, it's just a dumb chatbot.
No,
and so you have to, yes, internally, yes, because employees can get used to what they have to say to the model to get what they want out of it.